Welcome back to another episode of Beer Time with Books.
Pew, 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 pew.
This is our last book of the second season.
That's true. It's the
Oh,
last book. I was telling Brian I started thinking about my rankings today.
Oh God, there's so many. The choices are chaotic.
It is all over the place.
It's going to be really interesting just because I was telling Jamie in the first season there were a couple shoe-ins for last place, but it may be a little bit different for season 2.
Oh wow, I've gotta start thinking about my rankings now.
But before then, we have 2 parts of our last book of season 2. It's Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. What a choice for our quarantine season. I started reading this and I was just like, oh, this is too on the nose right now.
It's pretty on the nose.
Yeah.
It was like written in 2001, but like might as well have been written now.
But before we get into all of that, of course, we have a couple different sections to hit here. First and foremost, what are you drinking this evening? Who wants to start?
I'll go.
All right, hit us off, Danny.
I have a returning brewery, Cranker's Brewery from Michigan, Big Rapids, Michigan. This is the Professor IPA.
Ooh.
It's not too strong. It's very tasty.
That's relatively fitting for the intellectuals of this novel.
Yeah, I chose it for that reason.
Are we all drinking Tall Boys? I think we are.
Yeah, we may be all having some tall boy cans.
Nice.
Getting wild tonight.
No, there's no VOD on the pod tonight, though.
No VOD on the pod. That was for our Russian lit.
Just a bunch of Tall Boys.
You want to go next?
Yeah. This is Jamie. I am drinking. This has a lot of different names on it. I don't really even know. Haze of the Dead Hazy Double IPA from Distill Brewery? No.
It could be. I guess it could be playing on Distill or Disstyle, the Dutch art
Brewery
movement. Yeah.
in Illinois, but it's also a part of the Deadhead IPA series. So it's very, very groovy, very psychedelic, very Deadhead on the pod today. That was my Siri. I don't know if that got picked up on the mic.
Hey, that's also very thematic for this futuristic novel. Just get these insertions from our robot overlords.
Hello, I would like to be included.
You said Deadhead IPA. Hello, count me in.
Anyway, that's what I'm drinking. It's very good. It's pretty citrusy. I've really become an IPA person, and I didn't expect that from myself. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, I would have said, no way, Jose.
You heard it here first, folks. This is Brian. I'm also drinking the Deadhead IPA series, the Haze of the Dead. This was something that I had a birthday recently, and I just told Jamie, just get some cool beers. And cool beers meant Deadhead brews. And it's got a nice hippie bearded skull donning the side. It says support flavor, boycott bland. Mm-hmm. So we're really confident in the flavors of this one. But yeah, it is pretty citrusy, but it goes down very smooth. I feel like it's been a good pairing with some food. I just feel like it hasn't been with some food in general. We had some Japanese food with this, but I feel like it's not as bitter of an IPA.
It's not too
Definitely
hoppy.
has like a sweeter side to it. So yeah, it's been pretty nice for the brews. And with that, next we have the media section, recent media of a couple pieces since the last episode. We're out of our October episodes. We don't have spooky themes anymore, so curious to see what everybody's getting into these days in November. Danny, you want to start us off?
Yeah, this is Danny. Jamie is always really good at introducing herself, and I mean, if you're this far and you don't know who we are, I just kind of feel like I don't know what you're doing.
And if this is your first episode, welcome.
If this is your first episode, I'm Danny. I have been, Will and I are continuing to watch the Great British Baking Show, which is just such a lovely time. Every Friday, we just look forward to it so much.
It's a Saturday morning tradition.
Yeah, we've turned it into Saturday morning with our
really?
our breakfast.
We've been like very much like we cozy in with like dinner on Friday evening and we watch it immediately.
Yeah,
and
we still cozy in.
So nice.
That's the common denominator. You gotta get cozy.
Gotta get cozy.
And then
we just like
get cozy.
Having a cup of coffee in the morning and watching GBBO. It's great.
Oh, GBBO. Huh?
GBBO.
Yeah, it's a vibe. We get cozy on Fridays, and that's been really nice. It's such a balm for my soul. I like started watching old episodes, even though I know everything that happens in all of them. They're so calming.
Still things to learn. Baking
still
tips.
things to learn. I've also been watching I May Destroy You on HBO Max, and it's a little stressful, but. Overall, I'm really enjoying it. I'm about halfway through. It's I don't know. It's a great. I don't really know that I could summarize it, but it's an important show, I think, and I really like it.
Yeah. So are all the episodes out now? Because this was just some off the pod stuff. Jamie and I started earlier in the summer, and we had a bit of a break because we were watching as it was coming out. But it is all out now, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's like 10 or 12 episodes, and they're all out. It stars, I think her name is Michaela Cohen or Cohen.
Cole,
or Cohen.
I think. Coel. Cole.
Oh, Cole, yeah. She's brilliant. And I just have really been enjoying it. I don't really know that I could describe the genre of show, but I have really been liking it. And I've also been reading a book that has been on my reading list for literally, I don't even know, for like maybe a decade. I'm reading Misery by Stephen King, which I reserved at the library during spooky season, but it didn't I didn't get off the waiting list in time. So now I'm reading it a month later during Thanksgiving season.
The holdover.
What a book to be reading during this season of giving. But I am enjoying it. It's great. I love Stephen King. So those are my things.
Cool.
Nice. I don't have a ton of updates. I don't know. I don't feel like I've been consuming a lot of new media recently. But Brian and I did start the new season of The Crown, which I really needed a period piece, I think. I just I haven't been that interested in a lot of things we've been watching recently. And something about The Crown is just cozy. It's stressful, but
it's seeing a society being a society.
Yeah. Watching people live their lives.
We're just at that point now. We're just like, I just want to watch
somebody
a society be.
Yeah.
Yeah, even the stressful parts. But
it is stressful though, because
in this new season, Princess Diana is finally a character. And oh boy, if you haven't already delved into The Crown, you absolutely have to. They're doing a phenomenal job with it, I think. Like all the reviews I've seen too, people love their portrayal of Princess Diana and also Margaret Thatcher as being a terrible person.
Well, that's the other thing. Margaret Thatcher being in is just like that juxtaposed. It's just the 80s in England.
Yeah, it's a lot, but I'm really enjoying it. So that's
Brian,
my main thing.
You said that as though you lived through the 80s.
Oh, bro, big breath out. Oh, the 80s in England.
Let me tell you about the time that I was
Wouldn't
in
go
England.
back. Let me tell you.
In 82, when I was in England.
Expat.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I have.
Cool. I have been consuming another semi-period piece, a little bit more fictionalized, but this is in video game form. I took a bit of a break, took a couple days off of work, and started playing Ghost of Tsushima, and this is set in feudal Japan in the 1200s. This is about when the Mongols invaded Japan, and around the time of the shogun rule and with the samurais. and it's kind of this struggle for control and power in feudal Japan, and it has been very interesting to dive into that, just because there are a lot of items from that help kind of contextualize that era. And then it made me go back and watch, if you guys are familiar with Bill Wirtz, he did the History of the World, I guess, video, the animated thing. But before that, the precursor to the History of the World was the History of Japan.
Yeah.
And so I decided to go back and watch that just to kind of see where it all fits in. Of course, it's just a blip in the greater span of the entire history, but he does a great job with that. And now I'm kind of interested specifically in post-World War II Japan. I don't know if anybody's going to get this far, but if anybody has a book recommendation of that time period, just from what he had said and how Japan had gone forward after World War II with great economic development and going into a lot of, what we're familiar with. I've been watching anime, as I said recently, like the anime boom, the video game boom, like a lot of their other cars and computers and things like that. I think that is very interesting, and it's covered in that video. So it's been a lot of Japan over in our household. So yeah, that's been the recent deal for media. And with that leads into our main discussion again of our last book of season 2. This was Danny's choice. So we're going to toss it over to her for a quick summary on Oryx and Crake.
Whew, what a book for this time.
I had no idea, honestly. When I first started reading, I came in pretty blind, so it was...
Well, I briefly talked to Jay. The way I chose this book was I wanted to read another Margaret Atwood, and the other ones I liked or I was interested in were too long for our book, our page limit for this podcast.
Yeah, I guess we don't talk about it that much.
We
kind of have like
limit.
a 400 page or less.
We try to stick. I think we've been around like 350 pages,
yeah.
And some of the ones I was interested in were like around 400 or more. And Jamie suggested this one, and I was looking into it. But honestly, I was also coming in like I don't know. I hardly know anything about her other writing. I know I like her as a person and an author, but like I like The Handmaid's Tale. But outside of that, I wasn't that familiar with the rest of her writing or even her like poetry. So this is a dystopian novel. It's the first in a series. I don't know how many are in this series.
I think it's a trilogy, yeah.
Yeah, there's 3.
But essentially the book is sort of split into 2 parts. We follow the book opens with the main character, his name is Snowman, during his present day time. But when he flashes back, his name is Jimmy, and we soon learn that he is essentially in sort of like a post-apocalyptic or like a post-our regular world kind of scenario. He is like fending for himself. He seems to be the only type of human that he is around. And he talks about the Crakers, who we eventually learn are like this, it's like sort of genetically modified, like, other group of people. I don't really know that he calls them people, but,
they're people-esque.
Yeah, like people-esque kind of. And so that's how the book opens. We meet the Crakers and we meet Snowman, and then we dive into the second storyline, which follows Jimmy, who lives with his family in the before time, and through these like flashbacks, we learn about his childhood. We learn that there are basically 2 parts of this world. There's like I think it's like the compound. Which is like essentially like a housing project in the near the company where his dad works, and that's kind of how half of the population lives in this compound. But they're sort of built around like corporations, and then the other half of the world are called the pleblands, where basically everybody who like doesn't have a job for a corporation has to live. So don't love to see that. And the vibe that we kind of get is like things inside the compound are like very like clean and neat and like and everybody's provided for, and it seems that like everything is kind of at your fingertips. And like on the other side, like in contrast, the pleblands are like very I don't know. It's like they're presented as like dirty and lawless, basically.
Yeah, lots of like revolutionary activity and riots and different things.
Yeah, and we don't really get a sense that like the people in the compound and the people in the pleblands like interact much at all.
Yeah, especially because of how sterile it is that they have to go through so much to even get in and out from what we kind of get into.
Right, so they're separated like by security and everything. So essentially, that's what we learn. We learn about the compound, we learn about the pleblands, we learn that Jimmy eventually has a new person come to like his school, his friend Crake. He like has a knack for science. He's kind of like everything that Jimmy is not. Jimmy kind of has like an aversion to like math and science. We learn that Jimmy's parents, they get into a lot of fights, and his mom eventually we can kind of deduce that like she doesn't agree with what his dad is doing in the compounds, and so she doesn't like all of the genetic engineering that's happening, so she quits and she leaves, and she takes Jimmy's pet with her, and basically where we are now is we've met Jimmy, we've met Crake, we've learned about Jimmy's childhood, and we also have met briefly Oryx, who only sort of seems to exist like in Jimmy's mind at this point, but we learn that that she is a victim of child trafficking. As a child, she somehow gets out. We're not sure how yet. And in Jimmy's present day, he goes, he's on the hunt for like basically sustenance. He needs a way to keep living. And so he's, I think at this point we've left him sort of like on an adventure. I mean, I don't know. It's not that exciting, but he just needs to go find food essentially. So I think that's where we are in both stories. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
No, that's most of it.
I just want to make sure I hadn't missed anything.
Those are the big points.
So I wanted to just like start by like, I feel like it was clear from the start that this was supposed to be like a dystopian novel that is like a critique on society and like genetic engineering and like technology taking over. What other like themes or things like have you guys taken from this, aside from just like technology is bad, or like, you know, or like we shouldn't let the robots and the genetic engineering take over, you know? Like I feel like those are sort of the high level conclusions that we can draw. But at this point, what do you think her like overall sort of message is?
I don't know. I feel like I've been struggling with that a little bit. Maybe I think that we need to learn more about whatever the apocalyptic scenario was, the pandemic related thing.
Oh no.
I think they've mentioned the word pandemic.
Yeah,
I think they call it a plague.
Maybe a plague.
A plague too.
Yeah.
I think it's been either.
I feel like once we delve more into that, we'll learn maybe more about her main critiques or purpose here. I don't know. I felt like it's been kind of all over the place in the first half. Like there's a lot of criticisms of all levels of society. I don't know that I'm grabbing onto one in particular thing other than like big corporations are bad. Big Pharma is bad. This is dangerous. And I mean, like her very cheesy names for all the different corporations and different products are a little distracting to me. I'll be honest. I don't know if I was in the mood for a dystopian. I think like I just like wasn't in the like you guys said you dove into this not knowing what to expect. I think I did the same thing, but in the headspace of like expecting The Handmaid's Tale a little bit because it's the only Atwood I've read. And a lot of the names, the company names and everything throughout this have been distracting to me a little bit. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, this is great. I mean, I felt like a similar way about like the names. Like we'll come back to that. Brian, go ahead.
I mean, as far as the development, I think, yeah, it is interesting that, you know, we are halfway, but to some degree, you know, even that half has been split in half, just because I think that there's a lot of development on these two very distinct sides of this story. So, you know, when it's Jimmy and it's in this flashback state, a lot of the dystopian-esque themes are pretty subtle, which I actually did appreciate. It's just small things where, you know, they were talking about some of the ice cream that they were having during graduation, and it was just like soy, 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 and different things like that. And then, you know, you're talking about, you know, very casually talking about these restrictions within this society that is somewhat running normally until you start hearing about more of the outside world, because again, we just get like a couple of kids that are young surfing the web, getting into porn, getting into all this like dark web stuff as well, smoking weed, like all this stuff. It's all pretty subtle at that point, but there's so much further to go, because when we get into Snowman's side, which again is still Jimmy, it feels way more dramatic, because again, there are these like people-esque beings that are hanging on his every word. It just feels like so much has progressed past what we were seeing earlier. And so to get the full critique, again, what you were saying, Jamie, that we're not really even there to know what the overall cause is. Like, what are those few final dominoes to fall at that point? But I think there's just a lot of critique on capitalism in general in the modern age, a lot with climate change as well. They talk about that with their regulated climate, and then also, you know, how a lot of the seasons are out of whack, and it kind of
the lack of like real food also.
Yeah, just stuff like that, where all of the criticisms are there, and it feels pretty broad on a lot of societal aspects in general. But still, as far as those changes within society, not including the actual names of the companies and things like that, felt relatively subtle and felt like they were getting woven in very slowly. So I'm excited to see where it builds. But yeah, right now, just in general from the themes, it's just been like a broader critique of capitalism in general, which I think will play in later on, because we see that even Jimmy's dad, the reason his mom is so frustrated is that he's starting to pursue this genetic modification, not as much for the greater good, but for profit as well. And obviously that seemingly is going to play into when we get to the children of Crake later on, that somehow that would play into the broader role. So I think in general, probably just like critique of capitalism. Got him.
That's the punchline of the novel, actually.
Final word of the novel.
Capitalism.
No, final sentence, capitalism. Am I right? So anyway, I think that it is just kind of like touching into those broader things, which, you know, butterfly effect out into a lot of these other aspects of society.
Yeah, I found myself wondering quite a bit, like, you know, there are like dystopian novels that like are written and you pretty much feel like, oh, like that feels very far away, or like that feels extremely like different than the direction where like society is going. But I wonder, like, in the past, like this came out in 2003. She published this in 2003. Like, even in the last, like 17 years, like, I can imagine that, like, it is hitting closer to home now even than it did in 2003. And I mean, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that. But, like, sometimes I feel like with, like, I don't know, Fahrenheit 451 or 1984, like, when I read those, I'm just like, wow, like, that was like a branch that, like, society could have gone off. And, like, we sort of have, but we sort of haven't. It feels very extreme. This, like, doesn't feel... I mean, like, the Crakers feels far, but, like, parts of Jimmy's world, like, don't feel very far. And it's like, the soy made me laugh, but, like, when you go to the grocery store, we've got almond, oat, soy. I don't know.
Impossible,
it's like
Impossible Burgers.
I don't know. Yeah,
I love an Impossible Burger.
Well, yeah, I think that, like, I am glad to be reading this in an unfortunate way during this pandemic because like, honestly, it does bring so much more of that into, like, more of a believable territory. Hopefully we don't get so far as to, you know, reach
genetic
whatever's going on here, but, like, you know, the rapid development of the vaccine and things like that, like all these advancements within science and in the climate change aspect, we're in, like, the Greek letters of hurricanes this year, and, like, the pandemic is going off in general. Like, it unfortunately does feel very relatable.
Yeah.
In the worst ways.
Yeah. I also wanted to, like, so we should clarify too that, like, we learn that, like, the beings that are around Snowman during his, like, present day, where he's, like, narrating from, are called the Children of Crake. And then we also learn that the animals are technically the ones that came from Oryx. Did I interpret that right?
Yes, I kind of wonder if that's just him making up, like, his make-believe stories for them. Because a lot of those animals, like, even the genetically modified ones, were around before Oryx was.
Yeah, he definitely is doing it for that. But as far as Crake, though, Crake's involvement, I think that may be more than Oryx is. I think that he has a story to tell, and those are the two that he relates most to. But Crake, this is a recent development too, as far as where we're at in the novel, that this started to come up, where, like, especially for these humanoid creatures, that some of it was actually developed by Crake himself. Mm-hmm. And within the point that we're at, Crake has just now started to go to higher education. So seemingly he may have a broader role to play within that, but...
Yeah. Like, he definitely made the Children of Crake. I think that the Oryx storyline is Jimmy making that up a little bit.
Yeah, I wondered... It felt like... I mean, I don't know if this is intentional, but I mean, like... It feels... It feels like an Adam and Eve parallel a little bit. Like, not necessarily like man and woman, but it felt very like Snowman spends his time, like, weaving creationism stories for, like, these beings that he is around.
And he's doing it live.
I wanted to
off the cuff.
I wanted to ask you guys about that too, because, like, we've seen what the explanation of the world and Christianity and creationism and whatever, like, it's very embedded in our society, and, like, Snowman is he's just fucking, I don't know, this happened and this is what happened and they came from this and I can't tell you this for this reason. Like, do you think he's gonna get more, like, intentional about, like, how do you think that's gonna be a larger part of the story? I just wonder, because he it's not a huge part right now, but you know, he could be affecting these beings' existence, but maybe they're not humans, so maybe it doesn't matter.
To, like, piggyback off of that a little bit.
Pigoon back.
Yeah, Pigoon back off.
Hey.
I don't think that... I mean, I don't know if he'll ever have, like, a real plan. I also just don't know what Jimmy's motivation is at all at this point. I feel like if I were the last human on Earth and I were struggling to survive, I would just off myself. I don't understand what...
Hot take in 2020.
I've always felt this way reading books like this where it's like, you are the last person. I'm like, what? Then what am I doing?
But how could you ever know? How could he ever know? How could anyone ever know that they're the last?
Well, we still also don't know, like, I mean, there's a reason he's there and the last human, but we don't know why. Like, we don't know how he ended up where he is. Yeah. We don't know if, like, Oryx and Crake, like, let him live. Like, we have no idea. So you're right. Like, we don't know his motivation at all.
Yeah, I don't know what his plan is. It doesn't seem like he has any kind of plan other than trying to find food. And even that, he's not very good at. Like, he admittedly is like, oh shit, I shouldn't have told them that the animals are, like, Oryx's thing, because now I can't kill them in front of them. Like,
But the one sacrificial fish.
Yeah, the one fish per week. And it's like, oh shit, I would really like a pigoon right now, but I can't do that because I told them this lie for no reason. I don't know what his motivation is. Does anybody have any insights?
Well, not quite on that. I think, well, maybe a little bit, but I'll just, to answer the question on what you were saying for, the broader aspect of Oryx and Crake, and how it plays into this future timeline. It is pretty unique to see this world building happening like this. I don't know that I can recall a story as much that, like, we're getting into that, and that could get into another criticism, kind of what you guys were alluding to a little bit, of the religious aspect of it, of, like, that could be a broader critique now that it's somebody that, like, the entire world building and mythology building of it all, it's in the hands of somebody that is just, like, winging it, as we said. But at least the motivations for those two and keeping the reverence there, it seemed like those were the only two that he really had the broader connection for. So, like, it is kind of nice for him to keep that alive to some degree, and it, like, continues to garner sympathy for Jimmy, that, like, he does not try to do them wrong even though they don't exist. Like, that is kind of a nice motivation for him to, like, keep the spirit of these two alive in this way. I don't know why he would still need to, again, because we don't know, like, who's out there, but, like, it is nice to see that he keeps that affection toward the both of them even when they're not there, presumably, to see the end product of it. But I do like that aspect of it, that, it is such a unique thing from a dystopian standpoint, that normally you're talking about this broader power outside of your control, i.e. Handmaid's Tale, and a lot of the power structure there. But it's nice to have the power structure within this fully formed dystopia within the hands of somebody that seemingly is not abusing it in a terrible way. Because, again, he's trying to, like, keep reverence to those two. He's trying to do right by the children of Crake and wants to survive. I kind of like that there potentially, isn't that broader thing to fight against. It's kind of interesting to see it from that standpoint, because a lot of dystopia falls into that lane of, like, here's this bad guy, we have to do something about this bad guy. It kind of feels repetitive. So I'm liking that aspect of it, but I am curious to see on, like, how that builds into his motivations outside of the survival for whatever reason, and how that develops with the mythology of Oryx and Crake, because in the past he seems to have some misgivings toward Crake a little bit. So that's kind of interesting to see, like, why is he still nice and kind in his storytelling towards Crake when we're starting to see that divide in the past timeline.
Yeah, Crake seems to be very critical of Jimmy Snowman.
Yeah,
as we call him. Those that know him really well.
We love Jimmy Snowman.
I thought that, like, I don't know. I wasn't getting an honoring or like reverence vibe as much as like maybe you did, but
well, just in the fact that he tried everything he built into the story was like because they care about the animals and the world.
Yeah, I mean, definitely like he has built it up so the children of Crake.
Because they're reverent toward, they don't feel any. They're like, we want to meet Oryx and Crake. Take us with you.
Tell Crake that we love him.
Please tell Crake. Tell Crake. Can we come, please?
So that's the thing is that like I'm so curious because I mean when I first started reading I was like under the impression that like Snowman was the last human on Earth like tasked with like raising this new like single-handedly like raising this new generation of beings.
Maybe though.
But his behavior is very chaotic if that's the case because he's like they do I guess have some kind of god which is Crake, but he also like if he is their leader, if Snowman is their leader, like he's just like hanging out in like a tree in a toga like he needs them like to bring him fish. Like I mean, I don't know. It's just so I don't think it's completely off the table, but my assumptions were changed very quickly after I first thought that because I was just like, I don't know that I feel like he's acting as though this is his one purpose. He doesn't really seem very purposeful.
But he's also not I mean, not to like rag on him, this fictional character.
No, I'm fine with ragging on him. But I don't really love Jimmy.
But he's not that smart.
No,
he's kind of an incel.
So like we don't.
He's
really,
kind of an incel.
So we don't really know that, like, you know, we don't know why he's the only one yet. Like, if this is something that was tasked him or not. But like, I'm starting to get that vibe because of those memories that we're just starting to get again. This is, you know, within the last couple dozen pages that we start to have him describe Crake and his development of the children of Crake, that like, why would he be involved at all to even get told this stuff? You know what I mean?
But I feel like he was friends with Crake and Crake is pedantic, so he would tell him. Like,
it didn't always feel like that. Maybe again, this is all like pretty fresh.
I'm so curious. Like I really have no idea. I have no idea how Jimmy got from not going to school. Crake essentially got into like MIT or the equivalent, and like Jimmy got
Ivy
into
League. Yeah.
Jimmy got into like Southern, you know,
low grade art
college.
School.
Yeah,
like
which Harvard flooded. P.S. If anyone was curious, that's what this is. Like, it would be Harvard if Harvard didn't flood.
Yeah, whatever that means.
I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah, so that's where we are. But I have just no idea how like their relationship, how he, you know, continues to learn about what Crake does and how he ends up being in the situation that he's in. Like, it feels like I just had the flash into like freeze frame. You're probably wondering like how I got into this situation.
Up in the tree.
That's me.
Eating his fish, eating the one fish.
My name's Jimmy, and my life is pretty crazy. Like,
you might be asking how I got up in this tree with this fish.
Like,
let's
Disney
back up
Channel
a little bit.
Yeah, screw. Like, it goes back. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I'm so excited to learn how, like, what his path is, because we have half the book left, but so many threads are like, so many things have been opened and we haven't resolved any of them.
Yeah. Also, how fast does all of this happen? Because I feel like do we know what age Jimmy is currently in present day?
No, I have been assuming, like, the way that he talks and the way that he, like, the way that his skills, like, don't seem very honed. His survival skills don't seem very honed. Like, I don't really feel like he'd last that long. I feel like it's I feel like it's within a year or something, or like months.
I know it doesn't. He doesn't feel that old. It still feels like maybe he's like 20s, 30s.
And then he lost all the even the stuff that he lost that felt pretty recent because he's like, I had a map, but like that's pretty gone. And like a lot of the stuff, it does seem like it is relatively recent, but also we don't know when the events take place.
Yeah, but we know at least in where we're at in the flashback, they, like you said, are going to college or are in college. So they're like almost 20, probably, assuming that age
they follow the
works
normal
the
structure
same.
of society
Yeah,
in this
I don't
place.
know.
They didn't take a gap year.
And then what? Maybe it's like 5 years later right now? I don't know. It
Well,
doesn't
these
feel like
these humanoids haven't been developed yet either, though.
I know, but it feels like it's not that long after they were in college.
How much damage did Crake cause in college? Like,
Crake did
he just
all
went
of
to
this.
college and
Also, we just learned, like the last chapter or 2 chapters that we read, that Crake's mom died from like a pandemic thing, like a disease that she got from being careless, which I feel like is a
that
big
seems
foreshadowing
relevant.
thing.
Yeah. And it still wasn't like official though, because that was also relatively recent development where like Jimmy being Jimmy, because he's done the same stuff with Oryx this whole time, is like just trying to figure out anything he can about anybody. And he just kind of figured that out.
Yeah, because Crake
Crake's
wasn't
mom.
really open, but it said like
And Craig
maybe
doesn't
she
care about
had a
anything.
cut and she was working,
Yeah,
and
under her
so she
fingernail,
got
blah, blah, blah.
infected,
Yeah.
and so that sounds like
Jimmy
foreshadowing.
is kind of a moron.
I don't love Jimmy as a narrator or a protagonist. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah, so Jimmy I don't know. I think I maybe like Jimmy as present day a teeny bit more.
Yeah,
Granted,
I feel
like
sympathy for him, like I said earlier, because of his reverence and stuff.
but in the when he was like in high school or whatever he was in, like he just, I don't know. I'm not going to comment on his character because like he has a lot of shitty circumstances, but like he just, like when he his talking to Oryx and Crake is infuriating for me because I'm just like, why aren't you both of these people come into his life like very randomly, and they're both much more interesting than he is and his life. And to me, it's just like when he let's talk about Oryx too, because when Oryx comes into his life, we still don't know like how exactly she came into his life, but all we know is that he was watching like some sort of like porn with
Kitty porn.
he was watching like gross kitty porn with Crake, and
well,
it
kids,
was like a casual.
at the very least. Not that it makes it right, but
It was like a casual. What did you say?
well, they were also kids.
Oh, well, yeah, but I mean, they weren't that young. They were like 16, right?
I don't know. They were doing
I
that.
don't
They said they
know.
were doing that when they were like
They
8.
might have been like,
They said they were
10
doing
or
that
12.
really early.
They were doing
That's
that
fair.
very young.
So yeah, it's the Thursday after school. They go get a snack, they smoke some weed, and they watch kitty porn at 8 years old, apparently. And
All right, that's a clip for Instagram. I'm just Danny out of context. We're getting weed, getting a snack. Anyway, sorry.
It's just a normal day after school.
that's what it feels like. And so that's also like I feel like throughout the book, like that is very common, like kind of shocking things, especially the things that they do, and like just hanging out on the dark web, like is very, very casual, even at like a young age. But Jimmy thinks that he sees, he tells Crake to pause during one of these like kitty porn videos that they're watching, and like he sees this young like child, or like this young girl catches his eye, and he like mentions her eyes and like basically thinks she's notable. And then like years later, like we don't know how Oryx comes into his life, but he thinks that Oryx is the girl that he sees in the porn, and she's basically just like, I don't know, it could have been me, but like I did a lot of those as a child, so I don't know. And
I was in a ton of movies.
Yeah. We still don't know about Oryx like at all. There's still so many gaps to fill in. It is
Which
surprising.
she doesn't really want to talk
No.
about her past.
Because she always is like, oh,
that's what I
Jimmy,
was-
you silly, like, you always
You
ask these
silly
questions.
goose.
Just, like, chill out a little bit and quit asking questions.
that's what makes me suspicious of Oryx a little bit, because like yes, Jimmy's kind of being a moron, is just kind of like taking all this information from Crake and Oryx. Like, everything's just fine. He never, his conversations in the book, like, never follow up. There's never any sort of, like, he never continues to ask questions. Oryx just brushes him off. So, like, what do you make of Oryx's character? Like, we know basically that she was, like, a victim of child sex trafficking. But it seems very, very, like, almost like above the table, like not sketchy, but it definitely feels like not as, like, not the way that we see it now. Like, I don't know, it feels like a business. Like, the person she works for as, like, a child. Works for is in quotes. You know, like, I don't know. I'm just curious, like, what is the commentary there? Like, what's happening with Oryx?
I don't know what's happening with Oryx. See, this is part of what I haven't necessarily loved about this story, is that I feel like Oryx's story especially is told in such a, like, blatant, like, sex is commodified, whatever way. And it's, I don't know. I feel like Atwood is trying to be really, really shocking for not much purpose. I don't know. I haven't been that impressed with Oryx's storyline. I
feel that.
I don't know how to describe why.
I think to the degree that, like, everything else is shifted in such a way that, like, it's just slightly off the norm for a lot of these other pieces of commentary on different things, like with climate change, like with genetic mutation, like with all these different things, that extra nudge for Oryx is interesting because it's seemingly more accepted, because it's, like, easier to get to. It just highlights that, like, it's maybe not as far off from where we are at in our society or wherever society was at in 2003, that it was just, like, still taboo, but just, like, slightly more accepted, that, like, it was easy to get to. A lot of these bigger cities were able to, like, facilitate this a lot easier. I thought it made it a bit more shocking, and, like, Oryx is fascinating from the fact that, like, you're getting the perspective from somebody who has gone through all of that and is able to still, like, function as a person through such a fucked up background. Like, I think that her character is interesting and has a lot to bring to the table to, like, angsty boys within the compound, because, like, just from what I've seen on the back, there's going to start to be storylines with Crake as well, that it'll be interesting to, like, have her perspective through something that is probably the worst thing we've seen in the entire story thus far, to, like, inform these boys that are in, you know, an undeniable place of privilege within this compound, that she's still able to just, like, you know, interact with them in such a way and, like, kind of bring perspective to whatever their problems are, which are pretty minor in comparison to whatever Oryx has come through. I think it adds, like, a necessary outside factor to something that it's just like, are we really sympathizing with people within this compound that are within, like, presumably, you know, quote unquote, the 1% or whatever it is. It sounds like it's pretty terrible outside these compounds. Like, I think her part will be crucial to illuminating more of the outside world and get us to the point faster of, like, wherever we get to in the future. Like, I'm still interested by it for that reason, that, like, I don't know how she gets there, but, like, that outside perspective within these two boys' story.
I hope that happens. I hope that she gives some outside perspective. I feel like right now she is so what we know of her is so apathetic. Like, Jimmy clearly is angry about all the things that happened to her, and she's just like, oh, Jimmy, why would you want to talk about bad things? And I think that apathy maybe is what's bothering me.
But it's starting to shift, I think. Like, again, I feel like a lot of the stuff that we've started to see that's moving into more developed stuff, we've had so much world building thus far that, like, I think we've had it really nice in a lot of the books that we've read in the past in this podcast, where like the halfway point has been like somewhat of like a perfect halfway point for discussions, that this book isn't really fitting that thus far, that like we haven't quite hit that point where like most of the stuff that I recall reading within the last probably 20 to 40 pages is starting to feel like we're turning a corner, but didn't quite get there. That like I feel like that's starting to happen because like Jimmy's starting to prod more. She's revealing more. Because like at the beginning, she wouldn't even say that she was directly the person that he maybe saw when he was a kid. And now she's starting to be like, well, like explaining what all these men were doing to her and like getting into more serious stuff. And I think that like Jimmy will also play an important factor for her to be like, hey, that was wrong. Because that's something that she doesn't get. Is like, she, like, again, you said it's her apathy. Like, I think Jimmy's going to be that part where he's like, no, I'm mad about this because this is terrible. Like, the fact that you're not upset about this is upsetting to me a little bit.
I mean, I just think that, like, Jimmy is alarming also because I can't tell that, like, Oryx is that interested in him, but they clearly have a sexual relationship. And even when he was getting mad about something, she was like, it's nothing that you and I haven't done. Yeah. Like, what is the problem? And so that's alarming.
And he's a consumer. I'm not saying Jimmy's perfect because obviously he's like.
Their relationship is alarming to me. And maybe that is.
Also, Oryx talks about Jimmy behind his back with Crake, which is an interesting thing as well that we kind of got into.
There's a weird menage a trois situation.
Yeah, it feels like Jimmy is just like being taken advantage of by both of them, but we like still don't know. Well,
that's why I'm like somewhat sympathetic to Jimmy. Like he is kind of a fool, but like I still feel sympathy for him, and like something in the end is still like causing him to react and build positively into the mythology of Oryx and Crake in the present day. Like I think Jimmy still has a lot of growth left in him, which is why like, you know, it seems like you guys are maybe more critical of Jimmy. I think that there's like more of a journey for him to go on. I don't think he's great right now, but I can see like a corner being turned for sure for him, but I could be totally off on that.
I mean, I definitely like, I want to know like what happens between him like being sort of this like, I don't know, sort of just like in Crake's shadow or whatever, like, and then like just being the last human on Earth. Like what happens? Like how does he get there? But I also like, I think going back really quickly to the Jimmy and Oryx relationship, I think part of what like feels gross to me about their relationship, or like what feels bad, is that when he is like telling her that like all of those things are gross and all of those things are bad, it almost feels like a little misogynistic. Like it almost feels a little bit like he thinks it's gross that she isn't more grossed out by it. You know, and like
and he was like, the one, like he was the consumer of this porn. Like,
yeah,
it's
like
not.
He was the one who, I mean, like, and maybe, I don't know, maybe like it was supposed to be very shocking that like it was so casual for them. They didn't really seem to be doing it for like gross reasons, although maybe like he kind of made it sound like this is just like what was on TV. I don't know. Like when they were
kids,
8.
like accessible to 8-year-old kids, like that's
by hacking their stepfather's account.
They did,
like it wasn't. They sought it out. It wasn't like just we stumbled upon this. Like Crake fully had to go through a whole process.
Sure, no, I agree with all of that. I'm just saying like the circumstances at large, like it's all very terrible, but like they're kids. It's obviously more of an industry and not as cracked down on as we're used to in like the real world, because there's obviously like there's a lot of money involved. It's not like the feds are tearing this operation down. It's like a whole other Hollywood or Pixieland, whatever. Like it's a whole other Hollywood out there. I think that like there's some sympathy for a society that allows it to be that accessible and broad, for young children to like be desensitized to such a thing.
Yeah, but I almost think that that makes it worse because like there is maybe like some kind of like desensitizing that happens, but like Jimmy's tone is very accusatory. Like when he talks to Oryx about, he's just like it feels like, well, like it almost just feels like he's judging her for like something that she couldn't control, or like it feels very like you're like tainted or bad or like, I don't know, gross. I don't know. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this. There is so much more to their relationship, and I'm so curious what's going to happen because like we just don't know. We barely know anything about Oryx. I really wish that her story were more developed and not so specific. I want to know more about her world. And I guess maybe the point is that like this should tell us all we need to know about her world, like how she grew up. But I don't know if that was the point. I want more about her story.
Yeah, I'll just say something real quick, just because I think we're getting close to the end. But like the only reason I say as far as like a sympathetic thing as well, and bringing up the fact that they are kids, is that like a lot of that questioning and outrage from Jimmy comes from the point where like, again, he first consumes it when he's a kid, and I don't think understands the gravity of the situation, and then like becomes older and meets Oryx, and she starts to explain the circumstances around it, where he's starting to realize like, oh, this was not like as glamorized as it would be presented, where like it's a quote unquote movie from these people, where he's like, oh, you were kidnapped, you were like brought into situations with these older men. Like, I think it is.
But I feel like he recognizes that as a kid. He mentions them like they never look happy. They're crying.
But he doesn't know the full circumstances. He's 8 years old. Like, that's the only thing I'll say. Like, I know that it's all wrong, and I'm not like trying to totally atone for Jimmy here. But like, I think that there is definitely a process of Jimmy's growth of being like, whoa, the circumstances around like how you got to this point is terrible, and like she's desensitized in her own right. That I think that like. That story's not over, and I'm not totally like against Jimmy in that case. I think that there's still a lot more to be revealed in that degree. But
to clarify, this isn't the only reason I don't like Jimmy. I'm not just saying, wow, he watched porn as a child and I don't like him. Like,
yeah, no, I
just don't know
like
that
him for
he's
other
a great
reasons.
person in general.
No, I don't think he's a great person. I do feel sympathy for him, though. I'll just say that.
I don't know
How
if I'm
layered
there
of
yet.
you.
That's fine.
How very nuanced of you. Great. I mean, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of open questions. But let's get into final thoughts. You guys go.
Final thoughts. I don't know.
Jamie hates the book.
I don't.
Jamie hates Jimmy. She hates Snowman.
Is this going to be the new?
it.
Who is the guy in Northwest?
Oh, Nathan.
Nathan. Is this the new Nathan situation we're about to throw down over Jimmy?
If we could just
like
talk
we did
about
over
Nathan one more time.
Nathan is very underdeveloped. Anybody should watch the Northwest episodes for that brawl down. Anyway, go ahead.
I don't dislike the book. I've enjoyed reading it. I do feel like it was hard for me to get into it at the beginning because it felt much cheesier than Handmaid's Tale, which is the only other Atwood book that I've read. Like we start off with a man named Snowman, and I was kind of like, what's happening? It took me a while to get into it. I'm enjoying the story. I think that it's interesting. I want to know what happens. I am worried that I won't be satisfied with the ending of this book because it's a part of a series.
Yeah, that's the other thing as far as the development that I think is a key. That like we are saying how little has been developed, but it is like one of three books. So like it does make sense that it is a bit more slow than other ones we've read on the podcast.
Yeah, but I'm also worried that I'm not invested enough in Jimmy as a character to want to read the other two books at this point. Like we'll have to see where it gets in the second half. But that's where I'm at. I don't know. I like Atwood, and she has really interesting ideas, and I like the things she points out, but this was not what I was expecting from her, I guess. But I don't hate it. I feel like I'm being very critical. I don't hate it. It's like an easy, fun story. It's interesting. Brian.
Yeah, I'll just say one of the things that I said to Jamie earlier today is that this feels like a YA or young adult novel for like more of the A side. So it's just like kind of bridging that gap between like the more fully fledged and fully fleshed out like dystopian novel and more of like the young adult. The kids are gonna like rise up and save this doomed world. Like it is kind of an interesting thing that I do feel that it's teetering this line so much that like I'm really hoping it sticks the landing, because it kind of has to, with it teetering this line so much that since it's not fully seemingly committed to one or the other, I just want to see the full arc of it. But like I'm hopeful, but it's just stuff like the way things are named like feels more YA, but like then the actual themes are a bit more mature. So I think, you know, depending on where we go, I feel optimistic, and because I feel like everything that we've read within the last 20 to 40 pages is hinting at a lot of development to come. And I'm curious to see if there are any other people that will help develop the future storyline, because it does feel somewhat empty without other people there. But this journey has me feeling optimistic as well, that there will either be something more to learn from wherever Snowman ends up going, and then also how this whole dystopian wasteland came to be in the past. So I think that it's really just going to take, you know, those developments for the second half, which I think will lead to a more interesting second half discussion than we've had in for some books, just because it feels like there's so much more to develop, as opposed to a lot of times we kind of are like, okay, we see the path coming together a little bit. I'm still a little in the dark here, which I think will be cool to come back and discuss for our next episode. So that's kind of where I'm at. But like I said, feeling optimistic, but there is that really distinct feeling of like, should this have just like fully gone in the young adult lane, or should it have really committed to like going further with the dystopia? Like it is just an interesting place to go, but the unique aspects and everything else, I'm still invested to that degree.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with a lot of that. I feel like I think I was even like 20 pages in, and I was like, did I pick a YA book? Like it feels immature to me. Like, I don't know. I don't dislike it, and I enjoy the story, but also after reading Handmaid's Tale, like this feels like The Giver or something.
Yeah.
And
that's how I felt.
And
too.
actually,
I was really like, this is not what I was
expecting. Actually, The Giver feels like a little more cerebral and sophisticated than this book. Like, and I don't want to say that like I'm not enjoying it, or I don't think that it's I think it's an important book, but I also like a lot of the genetically, you know, modified like animals and the names of the companies, like it felt very they're just like animals' names like smushed together, and like it felt very immature in that way, which surprised me because Handmaid's Tale is so not like that. But then there's also like there's some very like adult themes that like you probably wouldn't read this book in like a high school class. So like I don't know, I think I was surprised by the by like how much of a young adult book it felt like, but I am really I'm invested in like Jimmy's story. I want to know how she wraps this up, how Margaret Atwood wraps this up, and I'm so curious about Oryx's storyline. Like I want to know the point of her. I want to know why she's here. So I'm invested in the story, but overall, like, the details, some of them are, like, very subtle nods to dystopian things that are happening now, but some of them, I don't feel like there's a middle ground. Some of them are very subtle, and some of them are just, like, extremely, like, sort of underdeveloped and obvious. And I wish there was a little more, like, nuance in there.
Yeah, I think that the net so far has been cast a little wide, because even when we were saying at the beginning of, like, what's the overall critique, and again, it may clear up as we go, but, like, you could pinpoint so many different things that, like, when it just comes to the broader, like, structure of society as a whole, that's, like, kind of a weird balance to strike. I feel like a lot of the most powerful criticisms start to hone in on, like, very specific aspects, so I think that definitely plays into it. And I'll just say the one thing, too, that I'm curious about. We did hear about the one thing that the trilogy is named after. We didn't get a lot into it, but it is the Mad Adam trilogy, and we heard about that just once while they were online.
Which I don't even remember what it was.
Yeah, I don't recall too much, but, like, that'll be a curious thing.
That word was mentioned.
Yeah,
once.
It was mentioned. It's yeah. So anyway, that'll be kind of an interesting thing that we, like, did hear that, and how that will play into it being a trilogy, and if that, like, what that develops into. So anyway, just wanted to point that out, because I was reading the back, and that's the first sentence of our summary on the back of the Mad Adam trilogy, and I was like, we did hear about that, but not too much into that yet.
Yeah, I'm excited for the rest.
Well, cool. That is the first part of Oryx and Crake, a Booker Prize finalist, y'all. Jamie was baffled.
This was right after Brian and I talked about it being kind of YA, and I was like, this was a Booker Prize finalist.
Wait. Sorry, I forgot to mention this. What also baffled me equally, the New Yorker on the cover of my copy
for Orwell,
says Atwood does Orwell one better. Like,
Orwell making the most, like, prime example of dystopia. Just like, she bested Orwell, baby.
You could say that about Handmaid's Tale, and I'd be fine with it.
Sure.
Yes, I agree when it comes to Handmaid's Tale, but this book feels like there are probably 10 other dystopian novels that address very similar things. And what, Brian, stop laughing at me. I'm not trying to add on final thoughts to the final thoughts, but, like, I was floored by Atwood does Orwell one better. Like, who wrote that review? Like,
we need to look up who wrote that review.
Jeffrey Toobin.
Anyway.
Sorry.
All right.
Current events. This was 2020 November.
Anyway.
So with that, we will be back next time with part 2 of Oryx and Crake. And after that, we'll be back with the season finale.
With our rankings.
Of season 2 rankings. So a lot of different things, which we'll have to get organized. But it looks like we are on track to have our quarantine season finish up by the end of 2020, which I think
what a season, friends,
is just fitting. I think we
need to finish it.
It is fitting that our quarantine season is by the end of 2020. I will just say, now that we're just shooting the shit here, all of our audio has been getting better. I have been trying to keep that call sound at the beginning of each episode to still, like, be like, somebody is distant, even though the audio is better.
We call each other.
We're on Zoom.
Yeah, we're on Zoom, and
we're zooming.
And you can check out all the pictures to prove it on Brian's Book Bashing. So anyway, we got to get somebody scatting us out of here. I did it last time. Certain.
I think it's Brian.
That it is not Brian.
It's definitely Danny's turn.
Oh my god. All right. Squeeba-doofy-doppa, squeeba-doobie.
Danny is such a squee.
Guys, I love a squee. I can't start a scat without a squee.
We will catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.